Hi, this is Dr. Inês Hipólito from Versus, where we are merging cognitive neuroscience with cutting edge AI to revolutionize how intelligent systems interact with the world. I'm here on the Edge of AI podcast, the cerebral playground where AI meets human intuition and ethics aren't just binary choices. So keep listening.
Hello, AI podcast passengers. Jump on in. Here's what's to come on today's journey. Find out our guest's take on how nature and AI complement each other, her insights on navigating the interaction of AI's intelligent systems while simultaneously taking serious the ethical dilemmas, and why today's guest is inspired by the colors of both the aurora borealis as well as the colors of a coral reef. All this and more, take your seat.
Welcome aboard the Edge of AI podcast. Snap into your safety belt and prepare to explore the depths of the rapidly expanding AI universe. Each episode is a dispatch featuring hyper-relevant reports from the pilots, pioneers, and passengers aboard the AI rocket ship. We explore the latest use cases and developments in AI, hear from experts building tech, and learn how this disruptive force is transforming industries and society.
Welcome aboard the Edge of AI podcast. Snap into your safety belt and prepare to explore the depths of the rapidly expanding AI universe. Each episode is a dispatch featuring hyper-relevant reports from pilots, pioneers, and passengers aboard the AI rocket ship. We explore the latest use cases and developments in AI, hear from experts building the tech, empower you to enhance your life with AI, and learn how this disruptive force is transforming industries and society. So I'm Ron Levy. Welcome aboard, and I'll be your captain for today's voyage. Just like most of you, I've embraced the spirit of exploration throughout my life, from starting my own business before graduating high school to traversing the world's most challenging terrains. I've always sought out new frontiers. I built one of the largest award-winning custom home companies, and most recently I've navigated complex regulations while founding and leading a public company that is dedicated to applying technology and training. Buckle up and get ready. Let's tackle uncharted territories in AI today with curiosity as our guiding star. So today's episode features Dr. Inês Hipólito of Versus.ai. Inês, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's my very pleasure.
Fabulous. Well, Inês is an AI ethicist and cognitive researcher leading ethics at Versus AI and founding Mission AI. An assistant professor at Macquarie's University, her work spans AI and cognitive neuroscience, earning her 19 awards and significant recognitions by championing ethical AI and diverse, inclusive tech communities. Versus AI is a cognitive computing firm developing advanced intelligent systems inspired by nature's wisdom. Their premier solution, Genius, which is trademarked, turns varied data into unified knowledge models, empowering agents to adapt and reason in diverse contexts, aimed at fostering a world where technology and humanity synergistically enhance prosperity and potential. Versus AI is the forefront of facilitating deeper understanding and collaboration between people and intelligent tools. Now, I know it sounds like a lot, and for those of you that are more versed in AI, you're going to understand all that. These are some of the deeper things that all of us in the AI world are dealing with now, and that's what makes it such an adventure. The future is going to tell how they all get together. So, you've got a really diverse background, Inês, and your expertise. You could have chosen a number of career paths, but you chose AI. Can you share a little bit about your journey that led you to AI tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So it has been a journey. So I did not immediately go into AI. I do have a diverse background. I've got training in philosophy, neuroscience, and cognitive science, and that's how I arrived to AI. Actually, more recently, it's from studying the mind and studying the brain that then I've become to apply that knowledge and develop theory in applied to AI. So it was not straight on to AI, as you say, was a journey.
Well, certainly. And before we get too deep into versus AI, one of the more interesting aspects of how your company approaches AI is with this foundation of emulating the natural world. What are the similarities between nature and AI?
Right. So one would think that they would be quite contradictory. One would think that you would have artificial on one side, and on the other side, you would have nature, and that they're not compatible. So we think that that's actually not the case. We look at AI, or artificial intelligence, as a having to be compatible, or a continuation even of the work of nature. And there are many advantages from our standpoint of view that for us to think like that. But the idea there is that we can and we should take all the learnings from how nature and the natural world and life itself self-organizes in ways that it delivers all of these forms of different multi-scale forms of intelligence. So that's the humility of going back to nature and looking at its laws, its principles, and its self-organization in order to take those lessons and those understandings and apply that to our artificial systems. So we really break up with the idea of that divergence between artificial and natural, and we actually develop, or at least our premise is a continuity thesis between nature and artificial life.
So really, AI versus AI is looking at enhancing the synergy between human and machines, and that's kind of the way you're looking at it, which is really a fantastic direction to look at it from. Can you provide any examples of how Versus is sort of fostering a world where technology the technology and humanity work together?
Yes, absolutely. So the idea is to take inspiration from nature and continue the work of nature, which has many advantages. One of them being precisely that it allows us to look at a distributed form of intelligence, if you will, in which case what you have is a network of, let's say, nodes of intelligence that are not working together in an encapsulated manner, but they are completely situated in the world, and what needs to be done, the tasks that they've been developed to do. But not only that they are situated in the world, but they also continuous with us humans. So this is a crucial point, right? Because what we don't want to have is centralized systems that are completely encapsulated from humans and our human control of it. So then once we look at the ways in which we interact, depend upon, learn from nature and the natural world, then it's going to come quite organically to think about diverse forms of intelligence or distributed ecosystems of intelligence where humans are going to be an integral part.
So what's really fascinating about that, and I'm just going to try and break it down for those that may not be following. AI is used in many different ways, but in one way, you can build your AI brain, I'll call it, right? Your own agent, your own encapsulated intelligence. And if it all lived in one thing, it would be like all of our human brains being tied together, which they certainly are not. The magic comes from we all think differently. And when we come together with those different ideas, I'll focus on the good, and the good is great things come out of it. So I think what you described there was like that, if I got it right, that it is keeping that mimicking of nature in the intelligence and how it's gaining more intelligence in its own worlds. Am I going down the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the key cores or principles, if you will, is this biologically inspired data processing. So, here the idea is to leverage principles from biological processes to process and understand varied data sources. And this approach may involve mimicking the adaptive and the self-organization kind of like principles that are inherent to the dynamic nature of biological systems, and precisely use those insights to interpret complex data patterns and relationships as an ecosystem of distributed intelligence.
And so Versus and Genius, these are your companies and products. What is it that they provide? Is it a platform to build these on, or a synthesis of the information? What is it in
So
itself?
it can have multiple applications in different forms, because what you get is this sort of agent-based modeling. And what it does is it generates intelligent agents that collaborate and understand and share the data. So these agents may exhibit some form of autonomous behaviors, and they're also able to adapt and learn from that data on the spot, in the situated environment, in order to construct their own understanding of the world, as well as to make online real world decisions. So rather than, for example, relying on past knowledge that existed in the past, they're able to become agents or have some agency of some sort, because they're part of this larger distributed network or ecosystem of intelligence.
So for any of our listeners that are maybe getting a little bit, confused right now, the reason I'm smiling is you might be confused today. If you listen to this podcast 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to know it like the alphabet. That's what's crazy. I believe you, Inez, you're ahead of the curve, and what you're describing makes a lot of sense. And then there's the term unified knowledge model, which I think is what you kind of just described by taking these other agents and combining them into one place, but knowing what the ingredients are, so you have a feel for why something is being produced.
Yes, absolutely. So what we are targeting and looking ahead is this multidimensional data and knowledge storage, which is revolutionary, and it's breakthrough in the sense that instead of having this monolith of data that is stored somehow and it's then used through a certain algorithm that is going to process and output a certain decision based on that monolith of data. What you want to achieve as a being ahead of the curve, as you well described, what you want to achieve is the capacity that an agent situated in a larger network or ecosystem of intelligence can make real-time decisions that incorporate and utilize the knowledge that is existent within this network or this ecosystem of intelligence, which, by the way, is just to link back to what we were saying earlier, is continuous with humans and should also be continuous with the natural world. So
ties them together, and that certainly makes
absolutely.
a lot of sense. If someone's trying to understand this from the outside, I'll call it would be like having your own Google, right? But controlling the feed that goes into it. So when you do ask a question, the knowledge it had that it's pulling from, right? And if everybody had their own, it's kind of like that. And pretty amazing. It brings me to sort of active inference, right? And that's at the heart of Versus. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yes, my pleasure. So it's interesting because we've been working on active inference for a while, for a few years, with the architect of it, Carl Friston. And we got all together to study the brain. And Carl developed active inference as part of one of the frameworks that gave rise to corollaries such as predictive processing theories that are also available in the contemporary cognitive science, as well as modeling, computational modeling techniques to understand brain data, and all of the connections to understand the causal relations in the brain connectivity. So this was back in a few years, and what we did more recently in the last 2 years, 1.5 years, was we started employing all of these bulk of knowledge and techniques into developing artificial intelligence systems. And this has been extraordinary because we are, like we were saying earlier, what we are doing is we are using these models and this framework, which is profoundly inspired and comes from principles of systems biology, such as the free energy principle, which also Carl was the architect of it. And we bring in all of these principles, and all of these frameworks, which are very much coming from systems biology, and we employ that to develop artificial intelligent systems or generative AI. And by doing that, we are able to work from a different point of view or a different stance, which allows us to break with the usual kind of like contradictive way of thinking that, well, artificial might be contradictive to natural, and we want to break that, and we want to say, well, let's if we are to develop forms of intelligence beyond the human intelligence that we see, or the non-human animal intelligence that we see in the natural world, then we have a lot to learn from nature. So active inference is a framework that is developed to understand the brain. And there are many goals that we had with active inference that we believe that put us in a very comfortable position to develop these artificial intelligence systems in a way that is continuous with nature. I wonder if you would like me to go through a little bit over active inference as it is itself, or if I should jump in right at how it helps us build artificial intelligence systems.
No, I think, go ahead and jump right in. I think it's really great. And I think one thing for me is, when you first describe nature, I think of, well, for instance, out your window, I think of the greenery. And I hope you don't mind me saying she's north of Sydney, Australia, where there's a lot of nature around her, including some cockatoos flying around out there we may hear. But I think of that type of nature. But you're including in nature, our brains, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a big distinction there. But yeah, go ahead and explain, and share.
Yeah. So yes, indeed. In active inference, the framework itself is a corollary of the free energy principle, and I'm incredibly passionate about the free energy principle, which put in very, very simple terms, which I'm going to try to put in very brief in the interest of time. The free energy principle is, if you will, a principle that comes up as a principle about how the natural world or life is organized. And then from that point on, you start building a framework and a theory. And the free energy principle, together with the corollary active inference, what it does is it helps us understand and model and predict patterns of behavior. And this is incredible because it gives us a unified theory of to explain or to understand or to predict even behavior of forms of life, regardless of the scale that we are talking about. So that's incredible to have that kind of tool where you can employ a principle that applies to all forms of life, from bacteria to the full agent like a non-human animal, to an organ itself like the brain, or even an agent interacting with another agent. And these are all different kinds of scales. And it's incredible that you have a framework that you can employ and apply to explain all of these different kinds of scales. And what you do is, depending on your target of scientific interest, you're going to define that as internal states. So you're going to define that at the present moment, at the present state, this state is dependent upon the external states, or to put it in simple terms, to the situated environment in which the system itself has been interacting and evolving itself. So then what you find is, and they are conditionally independent. They do not directly directly impact one another. And then what you find is that within this framework, that there is another set of states that we call sensory and active states, and those are the states that are going to mutually influence one another. And then in the end, without getting too dense into the framework and the formalism, but what you get is an explanation of how internal states of a system and external states of a system mutually influence one another. And this is fantastic, because what you get is a coupled behavior. So if nothing else, what we understand is that a system does not evolve, develop, or exist or within a vacuum. So there are different variables that are going to take place and are going to be extremely relevant for us to understand the state that the system is presently on, and to predict future states that the system might come to be at. This is extremely relevant to understand the brain. It's extremely relevant to understand patterns of psychological behavior and, for example, agents interacting with one another, which then, if we have this kind of framework that allows us to understand and predict patterns of behavior in different scales of life, then once you are starting to build artificial ecosystems of intelligence, then that's the kind of thing that you want to be looking at. You want to be looking at having different systems that are spread out in a network of intelligence. And let's say that these systems are artificial, right? So what you want to have is, you want to have these systems interacting with each other such that they mutually influence one another in terms of the information that they share, such that they can operate in a way that they can make online on the spot decisions given the state of affairs. So that's the goal.
Would you define that as sentient intelligence? Is that where we're going?
Well, it's hard to say. I think we are in a very, very, very early stage to talk about that. Indeed, there is some research and some people pursuing that path. I think we should take a little bit of a cautious approach on that. But there is something that I think we can talk about with confidence, which is, or we can talk instead about evolution of intelligence. And this would be a new framework for modeling complex adaptive systems. And we can call them active inference, and they could potentially enable something that would be more like, I would like more to formalize in terms of super intelligence within the next decade. And then, of course, I'm thinking about these structures in terms of the active inference framework that I've just mentioned. And what we would have is, we would begin with a systemic AI, where AI responds to prompts based on probabilities established during the training. And this is kind of like the state of the art AI. Then, on a first step, we can think about sentient as AI having some forms of beliefs about the world that are refined with the experience. And this here is really, really, really crucial, because what we are doing is, we're completely moving away of monolithics of data bases that are stored somewhere in the past, and operating and making decisions based on those monolithics of static data that we have. And we want to move a step ahead. If we are to talk about evolution of intelligence, then we want to have these systems that behave as active inference systems, such that the step one for sentient systems, to talk about that or to conceive of it, then a requirement is that these systems have beliefs about the world that are refined with experience. Then a step two would be sophistication. So this is the case of like making plans and experiments to increase their knowledge. So the systems would make these experiments to increase their knowledge about the world. And then on a step 3, we would be talking about, for example, being sympathetic, such that the systems recognize states of minds. They recognize, they have some form of empathy. I mean, empathy might be here. I'm not sure if I want to use the word empathy, but some form of sympathetic kinds of, that they recognize states of minds in other systems. And finally, in a step 4, we can think of being shared or being super intelligent, because we have achieved this kind of like collective intelligence that is formed from the interactions of AI with the human patterns. And here, that's precisely the point where it gets really, really, really interesting, because that's where you achieved this kind of artificial intelligence that is built and inspired in active inference and delivers what we have in forms of, we would call, natural forms of intelligence.
So, and that would include human values and intentions and things like that, and that's what hopefully developers will really be focused on as we move forward. And then all of us that are using different AIs and building our own, we're knowledgeable enough to know that these things need to be in there. Otherwise, you just get Dr. Spock, and wasn't a lot of sympathy, empathy, or any of those other things. So Dr. Spock without Captain Kirk would have probably been a dangerous man, right? So it's kind of like that. So that makes sense. I'm going to read something here from Forbes, because they reported the top concerns on AI, and they're shedding light on its potential impacts on employment, wealth distribution, and social behavior. AI-induced unemployment, equitable wealth sharing opportunities, and the influence of machines on human interactions, and the prevention of AI bias and errors prove the necessity for stringent regulations to ensure AI serves human purposes. So that was a mouthful, and I thought it was really kind of powerful, because the focus here is now we're switching over to regulation, right? So regulation, trying to keep up with all of this is going to be a challenge, but certainly necessary. So, I mean, let's just go into recent news on Taylor Swift and Jenna Ortega, other deep fakes or fake news on social media. It sounds like generative AI is contributing to the distribution of harmful content. What do you think are the key challenges regarding it, and what can our viewers do about it?
Right. So this is the live issue. Yes. So Forbes is absolutely right. So these are concerns that have been brought up and in many media outlets, including the panic culture that is disseminated mostly by advocacy for AI in terms of being conscious, which is why I think that one first step is precisely moving away from the view of AI as it stands as being sentient or conscious. That contributes to the panic culture, and I don't think that's useful. That's particularly useful at this stage. And then we have issues such as this one that you particularly refer to with Taylor Swift or Jenna Ortega. And that is a real issue that not only affects pop culture, but it also affects politics, for example. And we have examples here in Australia and New Zealand where there's been videos that have been AI generated in the interest of political campaigns. So we have to be incredibly aware of that at this stage, because regulations are not in place. Even though last week there was the first European Union law on AI, and I would definitely recommend those interested in the topic to go and have a read on it. It is a first step in that direction, in the regulation. It is an important step, and it's got virtue. One important note on that is that regulation is an important step, but there are two things. So the first thing is that it's hard to regulate something that we don't understand. So it is important that we work very carefully and very seriously on a problem that is known in the literature as explainability of AI or XAI. So this is still known as the black box problem. And the idea here is that we don't always, or more often than not, we do not understand how the system came to output certain decisions. So, what I want to say with that is, I want to draw our attention to the necessity of generating an AI culture where we are ethics by design. We already are sitting on ethics decisions, questions, thinking at the very early stages of development. Because once we get to this point where we already have certain technologies, such as the technologies that allow us to generate videos, like the deepfake ones that we were mentioning, when we have that technology already available to the public, then it's going to be much harder to get that under control and to regulate it. An example of it is, of course, there are attempts to regulate it, but there are two problems with that. One is that regulators are not always aware on the ins and outs of the technology that they're regulating. And the technology is changing every single day. It is incredibly hard for us to map out the landscape of the state of the art, for example, even in, let's say, just LLMs or Gen AI. So the landscape is continuously changing, and that's a challenge for regulators or legislators that do not understand the technology, because even we have a hard time keeping up with the technology.
What I'd also say that, regulators, that's not a monolithic block, right? Because at some point, someone's got to program and watch over, and that someone could be an individual, a department, or a full staff in a building, that is part of the regulators. And it's hard sometimes to know who's punched what in and how that regulation is actually working. So that is in itself a challenge. We recently had Eric Poulier of the Fee Institute on the show. Josh Krieger, my co-host, he discussed quite a bit about AI ethics, in regard to AI systems data collection and the immense processing capabilities. But man, what's an aspect of AI ethics with respect to data and data processing that you think does not get enough attention?
Well, I think it's the initial stage. So I'll go back to the Forbes, the note that you have on the Forbes article. So in the last year, I think that Forbes had at least two or three that I saw articles calling for ethics of AI officers. We need ethics of AI officers. So that's number one, because indeed the regulation is hard because it is regional, it is country wise. So it's going to be a huge challenge, and as well as with the difficulty of understanding the technology, as well as the other point being that one goes and reads the most comprehensive recent AI law by the EU last week, and concepts tend to be undefined, or they could use much more clarity. They might lead to loopholes. So it's really, really hard. So that's why I am very convinced that we need to work on ethics by design, or ethics embedded, if you will, kind of culture, where we begin working on these AI systems from the get-go with ethicists to make sure that we are from the beginning asking the right questions. Who is this kind of technology supposed to serve? What are going to be the harms? What are the expected outcomes? So that we have ethics-driven innovation that is culturally sensitive as well, rather than having a more market-driven approach to innovation for the sake of innovation.
Correct. And I'm going to refer to a term here, programmable ethics. So you can't cover all ethics that way, of course not. But there is some programmable ethics, and we've interviewed on this podcast some companies that do the following. One does audio deep fakes. It can recognize them. So if you put your own real voice into a library, then anytime something's produced, and if you connect that library, go to that, I'll call it website, it'll tell you this is real or this is not. The human ear, you can't tell, but they've developed that technology. There's also another one with images, and there's another one with videos. I believe we've interviewed one in each of those segments. So, for instance, with a still image, it'll say there's an 88% chance that this is real. The 12% is in these items here. But then you can make your own decision. You're much better informed. These products that are being developed are programmable, right? So when you being anybody are producing their own agents or their own AI, using their own AI, they'll be able to put these plugins in, right? And that's just credibility and it's validation. So all these things are in the works right now, and I'd categorize that under programmable ethics, and it will play a role, not to take out the human side, but it will take out a role, take part of the role of achieving that.
Absolutely, and that indeed would be extremely compatible with the approach that we are developing in Versus, because it is the view of you can have, and it is useful to have a distributed or an ecosystem of intelligence for sure, but with that understanding that there are certain conditions. And one of the conditions is the continuity with the human aspects. So asking those questions about who is it going to serve and how is going to serve it better. So those are important questions to ask, and you can indeed develop systems, and they are in the making, systems where from the very early stages you program ethics into. I typically talk about it as looking at an AI development, so the development of an AI is being a sort of like a life cycle where you can deconstruct or break down complexity by breaking down the life cycle into phase stages, right? And then at each stage you kind of like have to inject ethics, for example, in the form of ethics impact assessment that would allow us to, at each stage, work together with the developers, with the designers, to precisely make sure that we are asking the right questions at each stage. And what you get in the end of the process is you achieve something that actually is one of the recommendations by IEEE. You achieve a result where everyone that has been involved in developing that particular system has been called up to explain from an ethics standpoint their decision making within the construction or development of that AI system.
You know, even over the course of when we began this podcast, which was less than a year ago, we've seen such developments. Like I know Zuber Lawler, they were on our sister podcast, Edge of NFT, a law firm very entrenched in all this, and it was about ethics versus regulation versus law itself. And on the one hand, it's been described as the evil truth that we have to live with, and I don't know who the we is in that sentence, but it sounds like with what you're describing, we're getting closer and closer to the industry somewhat self-regulating to make the regulators' job more toward an oversight than more invasive. That's what it sounds like. So it's, based on your answers, I think you believe it's going that way, albeit nobody's assuming it's going to be there, right now, but it is going that direction. Would you say I said that accurately?
Yes. So there's a myriad of issues and challenges, and as well as opportunities. And one of the biggest challenges is to keep up with the pace. It's rapid. Is the landscape is transforming, and that is and it is challenging not only to those working in AI, but it is also challenging, maybe even more so, to those that are not working or are not close to AI, and they're confused as to how AI impacts their lives. Of course, we had the breakthrough in recent years, but it is also important to say that AI has been making many decisions in our society, from healthcare to law or wealth distribution or banking systems, or hiring. So AI has been in our lives for many years, precisely with the promise and the ambition of making our lives or our decisions as humans easier. Because we understand that we as humans are extremely biased. So we would like to, or we have this aspiration of being able to offload difficult decisions that are impactful of lives and livelihoods. We have this aspiration to offload difficult decisions to a system that would not be biased, to do it for us, to do it better than we can do. And maybe that's possible eventually in the future. As things stand at the moment, we need to be careful and really, really do our work to understand the problems that are inherent to the systems, the biases that come not only in the data sets that we use, especially when these are, like, as we've been talking about, these monoliths kind of data sets that are from the past, that are profoundly full of biases, but also in the kinds of algorithms that we use, because putting those two together and running them time after time after time, we potentially will get the same result, and the same result being a monoculture. And we don't, our society, our world is not monocultural. So that would be, I think, a problem and a huge challenge that I think that we should focus, at least what we do and our efforts should be focusing on attaining that understanding, or from that understanding that we do not want to propagate a kind of like monoculture, where we run the same algorithms, same data sets, and we will just reinforce monoculturalism. So that would be something I think to keep in mind.
Monoculturalism sounds like a very boring life to me, so I loved hearing you say all that. We're going to head on over to the next segment, Inez, and that is AI wants to know, because AI is curious and so are we. These are 10 quick questions, and they're designed to uncover the intriguing human mysteries that AI longs to comprehend, but it cannot. It's a snack break in our journey, so keep the answers very quick. But the safety belt sign, it's off. So if it feels right, we can occasionally roam about the cabin, and we'll explore more of who you are and what makes you tick. Are you ready?
I hope so.
Well, what's the first thing you ever remember being proud of?
All right. So that's a very hard one. I think I am quite proud today about the work that I've been able to achieve collectively. uh, how much I've been able to do and contribute with the different teams and the people around the world that have been so honored and privileged to collaborate with and learn from. And a combination of that is the various, of course, research that is out, but also what we are doing in Versus. That makes me very proud. I'm quite happy to see how we were able to bring these all so many different talented people together, and this diverse community that we have to achieve this kind of distributed forms of intelligence. That makes me very happy. I don't know if it makes me proud.
I'm interjecting in that because I can feel the passion. We're going to try and find out who you are personally. So these questions are personal for you, and I'm guessing you don't go there very often, at least not on a podcast like this. So it's going to get interesting. But I'm going to ask you the next question now, which is, what do you need help with that you wish you did not?
So what I okay, so let's I need to have my women's circle, if that makes sense. It is quite hard to and challenging at some points to have or to navigate the world from my standpoint. So I really appreciate, and I am very honored and thankful to have the women in my life around me that support me, and that by lifting each other, we rise. So that's, I wish I didn't need to have that, because that would mean that the world would be a much more friendlier place than what it is. But I think that that's what I need help with, is to have those women around me.
What is it that others often look up to you for help with?
Um, Typically, I would say that the most usual one is to navigate interdisciplinarity in the academic world. Personally, it would be to navigate the world itself from the point of view of how to keep showing up and keep things happening and keep motivated, and in a world that is hard to navigate, I suppose.
And what do you treasure most about your own human abilities?
I think that since I was ever since I was very young, I had this tendency to make connections between things. So when I finished high school, I wasn't sure what degree I wanted to do, because I've always struggled with liking everything. So I suppose that comes with its challenges, but it comes with a positive thing, which is that because I was always very interested in all these areas and fields and learnings. I think that one of my skills that I treasure the most is being able to make connections between topics or things that are not necessarily there, or are not apparently related explicitly.
All right. And throughout your whole life, what is the most consistent thing about you?
Showing up.
That's a big
Showing
one
up.
too, and critically important. Throughout your whole life, what has changed the most?
I don't know. I think potentially my confidence to show up.
Okay. And what do you find strangest about reality?
I would say what I find the strangest about reality is our standpoint as cognizers in the world. Lacking, we could use that, and we don't have that necessarily organically. We really have to work on it. We really have to work on our critical thinking, and specifically I'm thinking about the overview effect, which is the effect of the astronauts when they go out in space and then they look back into the pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan called it. And what I find strange about reality is that it would be incredibly useful. And it's strange that we do not have that overview effect, that we share this pale blue dot as a planetary community. And it's strange that we do, that's a fact. And yet we do not get that standpoint very often. And I think things would be much better for us as a planetary community if we had that capacity. And I find it strange that we don't.
So we've all had that feeling before where you feel really alive at a given moment, and sometimes you don't know why. Sometimes it's a accomplishment that happened in a moment. But when do you most recently remember feeling alive like that?
I think I am going to go. There are two moments, but I suppose that the commonality between the two is that it's the moments when I feel that I'm completely immersed in nature or continuous with nature. One of them was last year when I was in the Arctic Circle, and I had the privilege of being seeing the Aurora Borealis, so the Northern Lights. That was a very, very special moment for me that really makes me feel alive, because I was so connected with nature. And the other one is also another connection with nature, which is when earlier this year I was at Great Barrier Reef diving. So that I suppose that's what really makes me feel alive, is when I'm really deeply immersed in nature.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of us that are envious of that Arctic trip. That just sounds fantastic. What do you see as your most unique trait?
Well, I've been told by different people that it's resilience. So I do have a driving force, not sure from where, but I do feel that driving force of making things happen, and I think it's resilience.
All right. And if you were not human, what would you be?
So that's a very, very hard one to think about, but I think I would go with a living being that works in community. So I think I would be a honeybee.
I kind of like that, actually. That's a good one. Let's talk a little bit about sort of AI leaders and influences. Can you tell us about some leaders you notice in the world of AI? Tell us who you'd love to maybe even come onto this podcast, or that would help our listeners.
Absolutely. There's so many. I might reach out to those that are closer to me. Um, There are so many. I will definitely mention Carl Friston as a mentor, as a friend, as a colleague that I've learned so much from, and he's the architect behind the free energy principle. And I think that would be great to have him here to explore more of the theory, more in depth, if you will. So I'll definitely give a shout out to Carl Friston, as well as my dear friend and colleague Maxwell Ramstad, who is the research chief in Versus, and he has brought so many people together under this project of ecosystems of intelligence, and it's really inspiring. So I'll also give a shout out to him. Mao Albarracin, she's also a colleague of mine in Versus, and she's a huge inspiration, incredibly talented in innovation technology. So I would shout out to those that are closer to me, I suppose.
All right, fantastic. What do you know the X handle of Carl?
Sorry, the what?
The Twitter slash X handle for them.
Oh
So
no,
listeners, no.
you will not find him there.
Oh, okay. How do you spell his last name?
Friston, Friston.
Oh, our audience is going to be able to find him. So that's great news. Thank you for that. How about
Yeah.
some AI tips? Do you have any cool ways you've been using AI that some of our listeners might be able to take advantage of?
Yeah, so Forbes is always a good resource. Other resources that I find useful. So UNESCO has a bunch of events, too many to be able to attend, indeed. But they do UNESCO has many events that we can join online for free, and then they're made available in videos on their website. There is going to be a wonderful one, which I would strongly recommend. It's going to be in May in Switzerland, AI for Good, and I'm sure that they're going to have the videos available. So something that I definitely am going to be watching. And then other resources are anything that comes out of IEEE. They have the guidelines, but they also have many events. Many you can join online as well, and they're free mostly. So that's another resource that is really useful. And then I would also point out to our blog at Versus. We also have some updated blog posts every once in a while, which I think that are also quite useful. So those would be, I think, some pointers.
No, super great tips. UNESCO is a good one. Tell us where listeners should go to sort of track what you're up to, your projects you're working on, et cetera. Where's the best place for them to do that?
So Twitter is always Twitter X is always something to look for, because I typically update what I'm involved with on Twitter. and as well as on my website as well. So those would be the ones that are mostly updated, Twitter and my website.
All right, fantastic. You've been so intriguing here. There's no doubt that a lot of people are going to want to track what you're up to at Versus. So thank you for all that. And right now, it's time for another safe landing at the outer edges of the AI universe for today. This is your Captain Ron. And on behalf of our guest and the entire crew, I'd like to thank you for choosing to voyage with us. We wish you a safe and enjoyable continuation of your journey. When you come back aboard, make sure you bring a friend. Our starship is always ready for more adventures. If you're listening, go to Spotify or iTunes right now, rate us and say something awesome. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and pass this episode on to a friend or two. Your support and feedback means the world to us. Don't forget to visit edgeofai.xyz, where you can learn more about partnering and subscribe to Outer Edge newsletter for the latest Edge of company news, events, and show drops. In addition, connect with us on all the major social platforms by searching for edge_AI and join the exciting conversations happening online. Before we sign off, mark your calendars for our next voyage, where we'll continue unraveling AI's mysteries and advancements. And until then, bye-bye.
Welcome aboard the Edge of AI podcast. Snap into your safety belt and prepare to explore the depths of the rapidly expanding AI universe. Each episode is a dispatch featuring hyper-relevant reports from the pilots, pioneers, and passengers aboard the AI rocket ship. We explore the latest use cases and developments in AI, hear from experts building tech, and learn how this disruptive force is transforming industries and society.